It has been proven that it's really tough to use the features in Kali Linux if we don't have Kali Linux deployed. In this nugget, you and I are going to walk through how simple it can be to download, deploy, and then snapshot a Kali Linux virtual machine. There's 3 basic steps in getting a virtual machine up and running in VMware Workstation. First of all, we need the software. So we can download the software. We can either download the virtual machine itself and just run it, or we can download an ISO and then install it into VMware Workstation as a virtual machine. Personally, I think the downloading of the VM is a lot faster because we don't have to wait for the full install. And as a security note, we'd want to make sure that we are getting the actual Kali Linux distribution from a reliable source. And that would start by using one of these 2 sites and the links that are part of these 2 sites. Then once we've downloaded it and deployed it as part of VMware Workstation, we're going to configure networking for that virtual machine. In our lab environment, or specifically I should say in the lab environment that I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to bridge the virtual network interface card of the Kali Linux box to my physical/wireless network, which in my case is being represented by VMnet 0 in VMware Workstation's networking. I'm also going to go ahead and apply updates once I have internet connectivity to that Kali Linux box. I also want to point out that in my network environment, when I connect the virtual machine to my 192.168.1 subnet, there is a DHCP server running on that network. So if we want to, we can go ahead and either statically configure an IP address on this virtual machine, the Kali Linux box, or we can have it pick up an IP address via DHCP. And my default gateway on this 192.168.1 network is a little router at .1. And then once this virtual machine has been updated and it's current, we're then going to go into the VMware Workstation tools and we are going to create a snapshot. And the benefit and the reason that I'm demonstrating it is because we're going to want to make sure we have some snapshots that we can go back to if we need to at any given point in time. And this applies not only to our attack machine, in this case it's going to be our Kali Linux box that's going to be delivering many of our attacks, but also to victims. So that way if we want to hammer a machine and then roll it back to its pre-hammered or pre-compromised state, if it's a virtual machine and we have a snapshot, we can roll back to that state in VMware Workstation. So here on the host that's going to be running VMware Workstation, let's go ahead and open up a browser. And let's go out to https://www.kali.org. And from here, we could scroll down and simply click on Download Kali Linux. It's then going to give us options for which image do we want to download. Here we have a bunch of ISO options. But if we want the VMware version, we would scroll down even further. And here are the links for Kali Virtual Images. So I'm going to click on Kali Virtual Images. And if you'll notice up in the URL, it's now taking us to offensivesecurity.com. And so from here, we can follow the links for downloading the VMware version of Kali Linux. Or if we'd gone here originally to offensivesecurity.com, let me go to the main page. From here, we could go to Projects. So I'll click on Projects, and then there's a link for Kali Linux. So I'll go ahead and click on Kali Linux over here. And you'll notice we're once again brought to the Downloads area. And their website over time may change a little bit, but the key is we want to make sure we download the Kali Linux image from the reliable source. And that reliable source is offensive-security.com. So if we scroll down just a little bit, currently we have the pre-built Kali Linux VMware images selected, and then we can download the 64-bit or the 32-bit flavor. So let's go ahead and click on the 64-bit VM. That's what I want to install as part of our lab, so I'll go ahead and click on that. And also, as that's downloading, it also has right here a SHA-1 checksum. And we can use that SHA-1 checksum to validate that the image that we downloaded is the actual literal image. It's not a tampered or modified version. And the documentation on Offensive Security's site has the details, depending on what platform you're downloading it to, on how to use that checksum to verify that. But there's a great chance that if you are using HTTPS and you're at the right site, you're getting an untampered with download. So in the bottom here, it says it's about 2 gigs. It says it's almost downloaded completely. That's great. And then what we would do is we'd go to that file, we'd unzip it, because it's going to be a compressed file that we downloaded. So if we go to our downloads folder on this computer, there's the Kali Linux image, and it is compressed. So we need something that can decompress that. On this computer, I also have a decompress tool called Win7zip that I downloaded from SourceForge for free that's able to go ahead and decompress that. If we open up a new browser and we did a Google search for Win7zip and we typed in site:/sourceforge.net, it's going to show us the Win7zip results, but only for sourceforge.net. So here's one right here, so we'll click on that. We'd also want to verify that we have HTTPS, we're going to the right location. And then we could click right here, and that would download the 7-zip utility for us that we could then use as one of many archive utilities to decompress our Kali file that we downloaded a moment earlier. So I've already got 7-zip installed on this computer. So because it's installed, it's already associated with .7z extension. I'll click on extract, and then it's going to ask me where do I want to extract these files to. So I'm going to select a location I have already set up on my X drive, which is a solid state drive. I'll navigate to that location, and I'll go ahead and click on OK to extract, and that will extract the contents of that download we did over to this folder. And that's going to be our virtual machine for Kali Linux. And now through the magic of editing, that happened really, really fast. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and double click on the configuration file for that virtual machine from the file system. So we'll go to the file system on the X drive, go to the Kali Linux folder, and here is the VMX file. And because I have VMware Workstation installed on this computer, that .vmx is associated with VMware Workstation. So all we're going to do is just double click on that virtual machine, and that adds it into VMware Workstation. Now, before we launch this, we need to make sure we get the networking set up correctly. So for this virtual machine, it's got 2 gigs of memory, it's got 2 processors, it's got a 30 gig hard disk. And for the network adapter, it's currently set up to use network address translation. And what we want to do, at least in my lab environment, I'm going to go ahead and bridge that directly to the same network that the host computer, the Windows 8 machine, that it's connected to. And we could do that either by bridging it or linking it to VMnet 0, which is bridged to my physical interface on the host computer. So we'll go ahead and click on the network adapter. That brings up the settings for this virtual machine. And let's specify that we want to go ahead and associate the network adapter with VMnet 0, which is bridged to my Ethernet interface on the physical host machine. Also, because I'm not going to need a sound card at all, I'm going to go ahead and remove that while I'm here. And because I've got a few cores on the host machine, I'm also going to modify the processors, and I'm going to give it 2 cores on 2 processors. And while I'm at it, because I do have a little bit more memory, I'm going to go ahead and give this guy 4 gigs of RAM too. So a little more memory, a little more CPU, but if you're on a limited environment, you don't have a lot of CPU and memory to spare, you don't have to raise them up. But I do want to show you everything that I'm doing in the event that you want to replicate it. So we'll go ahead and click on OK. So our next step would be to start the machines. We could right click it and go to power and then click on startup guest, or we could click on this green arrow or that green arrow. It all does the same thing, starts up the virtual machine. So let's start up the guest. And it's saying, hey, this machine may have been moved or copied. And I'm simply going to say moved. That way it's not going to mess with the layer 2 Ethernet address or anything else like that. And then it's just going to go ahead and boot up this virtual machine, including bringing us to a graphical user interface. So we'll go ahead and click here to put the cursor control in this field, and we'll type in root as the username. And the default password is the word root backwards. So it's TOOR. So the user is root, and the default password is TOOR. And then we'll go ahead and press enter to sign in. And in VMware Workstation, I can also click on this icon right here, and that will enter full screen mode, which gives the full real estate of the screen to that virtual machine. To get that control back, we can take the mouse, hover near the top of it. That brings down the menu again, and we can click on the full screen option that would undo that feature. So for now, I'm going to leave it full screen. Now, to verify the IP address that this machine has, there's a few ways we could do it. Number 1, we could use the graphical user interface. Number 2, we could go to a command line. Or 3, we could bring up a browser and just see if it actually works. So let's start off with the command line interface first. We'll bring up a terminal. We'll click over here on the icon for terminal. And we'll type in ifconfig and press enter. And this reveals that we have the IP address of 192.168.1.26, which implies we got that from a DHCP server. And in fact, let me make this window a little bit bigger so we don't have a wrapping issue. So I'll scroll that over there and just bring that over a little bit. There we go. Or if we want to look at the IP information from a graphical user interface here in Kali Linux, we can click on this little networking icon right here. From the drop down, we can select wired connection, click on that, and then go to wired settings. Here we have the wired connection highlighted. We can click on the little gear icon in the bottom right hand corner, and here it's showing us the details. So we've got a gigabit interface. There's its IP address. It also has an IPv6 address. There's the layer 2 address. And the default gateway is set up as 192.168.1.1. And it's also using 192.168.1.1 as a DNS server. So I've got this router on my 192.168.1 network. It's at .1. And that router is acting both as a default gateway. It's also providing DNS services, or at least relaying those DNS requests for clients who make DNS requests to the router. So those all look great. So we'll go ahead and click on cancel because we're not going to change anything there. And we could also do a quick ping just to verify that we can reach, for example, something on the internet. Do a ping to 8.8.8.8. That's one of Google's servers. We'll click on Control-C to stop that. We could also do a trace route out to 8.8.8.8, and that will verify the path that we're taking or attempting to take out to the internet. So those parts look great. So now that we have connectivity out to the internet, the other thing we want to do is update this distribution of Kali Linux. And to do that, we're going to type in apt-get space update and press enter. And that's going to chew on that for a little while. Fantastic. And when that's done, we're going to do an apt-get apt-get space dist-upgrade. Now, this is going to prompt us to continue. It's going to use additional disk space. I'll go ahead and put in a Y for yes, press enter. It's also going to prompt for additional confirmations about stopping and restarting services. So effectively, we're just going to want to say yes to everything until the entire process finishes. And this could take up to a half hour or more, depending on your CPU and your processor and your internet connection involved. And due to the magic of editing, what you and I get to do is I'm going to fast forward till all of this is done so we can continue on with the final step, and that is to take a snapshot of the freshly updated Kali Linux box. So back at Kali Linux, I'll go ahead and press enter to enter my password for root, which I haven't changed yet, so it's still TOOR. We'll press enter, and that confirms for us that the update is done. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close that window, and I'm also going to shut down Kali Linux. I'm going to go to the power button up here, and from the drop down, go to the power icon and select power off. Whenever we do a snapshot, it's best for time-wise if we have the virtual machine powered off and take a snapshot of that machine in a powered off state. That'll save you a boatload of time and disk space. I'm going to go ahead and go up here and take it non-full screen. Actually, it's in the process of powering off still. And as soon as the little green arrow is no longer here, that virtual machine will be powered off. So now that that virtual machine is powered off, let's right-click on it, and to make a snapshot, we can go down here to Snapshot, click on Take Snapshot. So we can take a snapshot by clicking here from this side menu, or there's also a shortcut, same icon, right here, that we could create a snapshot with. Or if we wanted to go to the Snapshot Manager, which we'll do in a moment, we could either use this option, or there's also a little shortcut up here as well. So let's go ahead and take a snapshot, and I'm going to call this Kali, right after initial update, and you can put a description in there if you want to and click on Take Snapshot. And because it's powered off, it doesn't have to take a snapshot of the entire memory state, which if we had a virtual machine that was running, we'd have to back up all that memory state as well, and that'd take a lot more disk space and a lot more time. So now in the future, if we ever want to go back to this exact state, we could right click on that virtual machine. From the drop down, select Snapshot. I'd like to go to Snapshot Manager so I can see exactly what my snapshots are. We could click on that snapshot and then click on Go To. And that would roll back any changes past that snapshot back to that exact moment in time. And then as we progress through the course, and as you progress through your lab, you can delete the snapshots that are older because you'll no longer need them. But I always like to have at least one snapshot of the previous state so I can roll back to that spot if I need to. In this nugget, we've downloaded, deployed, and updated a Kali Linux box as one of our tools in our arsenal in our virtual lab environment. As homework, I would strongly encourage you to build your own practice lab and practice virtually everything that you see us do together in class. Practice it on your own as well to help reinforce those skills. Hey, I'm glad you joined me for this nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.